Imagine trying to build a huge building without a plan. Well, that's exactly what it's like to build a business without a process map. So in this video, I'll show you exactly what a process map is, how you can build one, the common problems people run into when building a process map, and exactly the best tools to help you do it right. By the end of the video, you'll be able to create a clear map of your whole business, including who does what and how everything works together. So let's dive in. All right, cool. So now I have 6 different examples of process maps that I've built before for some of my clients. Of course, we have a lead generation agency, travel agency, consulting agency, web design, voice agent, and another lead generation agency. That way you get a feel of the different varieties and how they all look. But to be honest with you, the structure of a process map is very similar for every single business. So not much changes. So if I zoom in here and I go to the lead generation agency for the first one, I can see that it is at first glance broken down into step by step. And that's the first thing here. You want to break everything down step by step so that it's much easier for you guys to follow the whole process. Now, the first thing I do here is ask for softwares. Now, the other examples don't have this, but I wanted to ask for this lead generation agency, so I put it here. And you can see here that they use ClickUp for tasks, Notion for SOPs, Drive for client folders, Docs for client documents. This gives me a view of all the softwares they have, and exactly, you can tell a lot by all the software they're using, because you can tell a lot by a stack of a company, right? Because just having this in place, I already understood that their system is pretty much scattered everywhere to Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Drive, and all that sort of stuff. So that's the first step. In terms of the actual process, they have an onboarding call. So the first step is here, onboarding call. Because what I do is I take everything from the client delivery. So from the moment a client signs to the moment that a client is delivered, right? So the first step they had is onboarding call. In the onboarding call, they wanted to set client folders. So they needed 3 client folders for every single onboarding call. Each folder had 3 subfolders, and each subfolder had 5-6 documents, right, for each one. Here we have onboarding, marketing material, and analysis folder. Now, this is important for me to understand because when I want to build a system, it's sort of, I need to see this. I need to see how many folders they have and what documents within each folder and so on, which is why it's important to even go a step deeper into not only what folder, but also what are the folders within the folder and what are the documents within the subfolders in this case. Second step is onboarding checklist email. And this is an email that's sent to a logistics email sent to the client, asking them for different things. And I even put a screenshot of the actual email. And my process maps are a bit different from the other agencies just because I go a step deeper in terms of the visual representation. So the way that I typically do it is I ask them to share the screen, and they can obviously take me through their CRM and stuff like that. I just take screenshots and add it here, just like this email. I told them to take a screenshot so that I could add it here. So when you're building a process map, it's much easier to add your current setup and the way it looks into the actual process map, just like this. You're sending an email. What does that email look like? Just so you also visualize it in a step deeper. Then here, no action required. And then they go through a whole process, right? LinkedIn accounts, account managers get connected, profile optimization, approval, warming up accounts, done, and launch. At the same time, they also have ICP approved, build audience segments, personal scripts. So this right here is in contemporary. So they do this at the same time, which is why you split it 2 ways, and then they happen at the same time, and then you go through. And you can see here I have a lot of sticky notes. This is for extra details that I want to know exactly about each step without having to put it in a box format, right? That's sort of what it is. And this right here is the fundamental structure of this process map. And in the process map, we just want to get a high level view of what everything looks like and how everything works together. And of course, I mentioned here, you want to go a step deeper into the actual documents, just because here it's important to understand exactly what you need for each client. And that's pretty much it. In terms of the process, you want to get a high level overview, and that's where you put it step by step so that you can visualize it and everyone can see what it looks like. So this is pretty much it. And I also forgot to mention that I do put a sales process here just so I get an overview of how does a client get in the first place? What do you guys have? For this example, we have sales call, close, send proposal, and send invoice. I don't go into too much detail here just because I don't need to, because it's not what I'm solving. But if you need to do this for your own business, I recommend you also do the sales process. So where do you get the leads from? What does that lead acquisition strategy come from? Is it ads? Is all that sort of stuff? And then put into a flowchart until they get closed, and then you start the client delivery. So that's the first example. Then we have a travel agency. So this one's a much more visual sort of way, and it's a bit more intense. If I zoom in, I can see that we have the first step, which is inquire from agent, from find emails. I put the email, I put some extra details. Then you have to do a step-by-step process. And here I also put the CRM. Of course, it's blurred for obvious reasons, but I also want to put what their CRM looks like exactly. So they need to file in Excel. I put the Excel screenshot. Then they need to start filling out Travelify, because as a travel agency, they need to make itineraries for clients. And that's where they start filling Travelify. So I asked them to share the screen, take a screenshot and add it here. And the same thing happens for all the different stages. And even here, I go deeper into the CRM. So why does this go here and so on? And it's very visual here, right? It's more visuals than text, to be honest, just because I also do have a call recording that I can use. But essentially, when you build a process map is, again, you want to build step by step and also put visuals. So what does it look like, right? What does the drive look like? Add it there. What do the documents look like? That way you can visually see it. And it's much easier to follow and so on. So when a client is one, then we add them to a different stage and so on. It's more specific to them until the end. Then we go to the consulting agency. So consulting agency, a bit easier in terms of the high level. So softwares, they use LexOffice, Signature, Invoice. HubSpot, they use a CRM. And I broke down their sales process. As I mentioned, it's also important for me to see exactly what it looks like, but you want to have sales and client delivery. So here they want to have the contract signed, small clients, 100% upfront. So just extra notes that I thought I added here, just from what he told me on the call. You want to send upfront invoice, onboarding email, onboarding call, general details. And then he has 2 different dashboards for clients. So I asked him, share your screen. Let me take a screenshot and add it here. Answering questions and quarterly invoice. So that way he has the whole process mapped out. He can see what it looks like. And also part of the conversation is not just mapping out, but discussing exactly where everything is at. Because a lot of times what happens with founders is that they start mapping things out, which is great. But the problem is that a lot of the things they're sort of inconsistent at times, which is why we have these calls where you're sort of consulting with the whole agency, with your whole team, and seeing, is this step meant to be here, right? Because a lot of times you're just so deep in the business, you don't take a step back. And by taking a step back, you can visualize exactly what each step looks like. Then we have a web design agency right here. This is a bit more intense. Again, we have the onboarding from the client signs the contract, receive an upfront payment. And then here, all the pink things that you see here, they're all for my automation, for the automation side of the actual system. Strategy call. And then I want to put exactly what did they discuss in the strategy call, audit, what did they discuss in the audit? And then you start with the design delivery process. So create brand strategy documents, what do they need for each document, client approval, writing project, load of create, and it's a step-by-step process like before, right? That we go through. Not a crazy amount of detail for each one. You could add more detail in terms of like the intricacies within each step, but for this process right here, there wasn't a crazy amount that we had to do, which is why I put it step by step. And then here is something that I added after the audit, just for the automations that we mentioned here. So when he said 7 days, these are all reminders, these are all tasks that he needs to have for his delivery process that are automatically assigned, which is why I put automations here. Next is voice agent agency. So this is pretty well mapped out. I did it with the founder, and everything happens within 72 hours of signing, happens between here and then here, right? So we have agreement signed. And by the way, he also broke this down into different colors. So client actions, provider actions, both, and details. Matt, who's the founder, sends personalized video. So he has all of this. Watch onboarding videos, exactly what's inside. Fill out the onboarding form, what's inside here. Schedule strategy call. He wants to make a Notion dashboard. He wants to have all of this. Update client dashboard is ready. Account creation, he has all of this included. And the strategy call covers this. And then he goes through a step-by-step in actually developing the voice agent, in this case for them, until the client is live, right? So these are all the steps that he needs to have. And he even mentioned the 72 hours so that we can see exactly the timelines as well on all these processes. And the last one is a lead generation agency. And here we started by breaking down the sales process. So everything from inbound, outbound until the calls. And also, as you can see here, a reoccurrence is that I added the softwares. So what software do they use? And also general information. So this is something that's optional, and I wanted to add here because it is optional. You can add it, you cannot add it. If you're with your whole team, that's a discussion for a different time. But I thought that for my clients, I want to see exactly, I want to get some numbers here. So delivery process starts with a verbal close. You make the contract needs to have this. Then you make the Stripe link, you send an onboarding email, the client pays, onboarding call, and then you start the whole process. So ICP mapped, start building list, enriched list with contact details, send email to client approved and then launch. And then you also have the client call with the cold caller to train them. And by the way, all of these exact statuses that we see here on the blue, those are the ones that we then start the implementation on. So when we build a system, a client delivery system, we want to know exactly where each client is at. And by knowing where each client is at, they need to have statuses. So they need to know exactly that each client is at verbal close. And then if each client is at send onboarding email, then you add them there. Then onboarding call, then ICP map, started building list. So these are all the statuses that we need for the actual system when we build it. And this gives us a fundamental structure for what it looks like, right? So that's the whole process for the client delivery. These are all different examples of different types of agencies, but the structure is the same. It's taking something step by step and then adding extra notes to each step to make sure that you have more detail. So now let's talk about the biggest challenges when building a process map. The reality is most people don't even know where to start. And this leads to paralysis because they start overthinking which tools to use, how detailed should a process map be, who to involve in the actual mapping, but also what process do they have to start mapping first. So here's some simple advice that could get you started right away when actually building a process map. The first one is don't overanalyze, because we want to keep things as simple as possible. And by overanalyzing, you're adding so much more information than you actually need to. So keep it simple, keep it structured, step by step, add some extra notes, who's responsible, and then move on to the next step. And if you're wondering, what should I start mapping out first? Just map out what's bothering you the most. Well, what is that one thing that, again, hurts you the most but brings the most value when it's actually mapped out, when you actually improve it? So start with that process first, break it down, and that's the one that we're going to be using to map out for the start. So the third one here is use what works. So I use Miro for the software platform to create these flowcharts, these process maps for my clients, but also for my own agency. But there's a bunch more that you can use. Simply, the best softwares are the ones that you actually use. So start with one, start with the simplest, and then you can just start building. The fourth one, as I mentioned, is map a sequence. It's all about sequencing everything that you have so that you can systematize your business, right? You can systematize a process, you can visualize what it looks like, and then you can start the implementation. And the last one here is create a version 1, because the reality is your first process map is not going to be perfect, and that's fine, right? The whole point here is not to make it perfect. The point here is to get started mapping things out and visualizing it, because the worst process maps are the ones that you don't make, right? So make one, start, and then iterate over time. And if you're an agency making over 20K a month and you want to scale your client delivery, completely done for you, hands off, so you can double client capacity and automate 50% of your whole process, then there's a video down below which breaks down exactly the whole strategy that we've implemented in over 25 agencies. No pressure at all. Check it out when you're ready, and I'll see you in the next one.